Velkommen alle sammen. The Christian question. Jackson Crawford did a video on this recently, and I devote a whole chapter in my book to this question as well. Check back next week. The book will be up for sale on Norse Imports. You guys have been patient, waited a couple years for this. I have a couple additional things to say, and I'm not going to be quite as nice as Jackson Crawford. Since our sources on the Norse religion are written by Christians, can we actually trust any of it? This is claimed by a lot of people, not scholars. It's only the people who are too lazy to read, and then they just decided that they're going to make up their own religion and call it Norse and do whatever the hell they want. And when someone calls them out for doing something incorrectly or wrong or just dumb sometimes, instead of humbling themselves and wanting to learn and be respectful to our culture and our religion, they just cry and say the whole religion was reconstructed and we should do whatever the hell we want. Yeah, great. Okay, go be Wicca then. Okay, go be an eclectic pagan, or go make up your own religion, build a temple and call it the religion of me, 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 me. Okay, don't say you are pre-Christian Norse or you are following the native Germanic religion if you're not. Because we do have thousands and thousands of pages of reliable sources. I'm not expecting anyone to go ahead and memorize all of them or spend a lifetime of research on it like I've done, but we should all go at it humbly and try to learn. And even me, I'm doing this every single day, always learning, looking for new sources. So I'm going over quickly which sources are reliable and which are the ones we can trust. The first thing, the sources are not all written by Christians. We absolutely do have sources written by pagans. Runic inscriptions, runestones, amulets, talismans, burial goods, carvings, all these things. They do things like invoking gods, Odin, Thor, Freyr, Tyr. They show prayers, they show magic spells. They also include imagery in a lot of their artwork, which matches what we find in the later myths. So if archaeological finds from pagan times line up with the stories written down by Christian scribes a few centuries later, guess what? That's proof that those stories were remembered accurately. It not only confirms that actual part of the myth or the story that is recorded was believed in pagan times, but it gives even more credibility to the rest of the story as a whole. Are the Christian scribe written sources 100% reliable? No. The Prose Edda, for example, has some points that we know directly conflict with older pagan sources, but in general, it is a very valuable text. This brings us to the Poetic Edda versus the Prose Edda. The Poetic Edda, preserved in the manuscript called the Codex Regius, and there's a couple other poems preserved in some other manuscripts as well that are included in what you guys know as the Poetic Edda today. But basically, they were written down starting in the 13th century, but the poems themselves are much older. Scholars agree that these poems were passed down orally from pagan times, if not all of them, then most of them. We know this because of the language that was written, the meter, the style of poetry, and it's basically that the way they were written down in the style, in the Poetic Edda, it was a much older language than was spoken at the time when they were written down, starting in the 13th century, depending on the poem. Some are older than others. If you guys want to dive deeper, it's a really a couple fascinating papers on that. I'll put them up here where they break it down and which actual poems can date to which age. If you want to read more about that. And I also cover that in my book. We can speak about the Prose Edda next. The claim is that a lot of people make is that Snorri Sturluson, a Christian who was writing in the 1200s, centuries after paganism was abolished in Iceland and Scandinavia. That's a complete load of shit. Yes, the pagan religion was officially outlawed in the year 1000. By the way, after threat of war from Olav Tryggvason. But guess what? He was killed the very next year, and then the people would have reverted. We have the pagan temple of Uppsala all the way in the late 11th century. But beyond that, we have laws such as Gulathing, Frostathing, Eidsviathing, and more of those from the 1200s, 1300s, even some laws going up to the 16, 17, 1800s prohibiting pagan belief and practice. The pagan religion was far from dead by the time Snorri Sturluson was writing his Prose Edda. The pagan religion was outlawed, but they weren't quite at the point where they were burning all the witches and pagans at the stake quite yet. Paganism would have still existed in society, it would have been somewhat tolerated, but frowned upon depending exactly where you were. Probably not in the major settlements, in the king's courts and all that stuff, but in rural, remote areas, you can bet. So it wasn't the claim that Snorri was writing about the religion of his pagan ancestors from hundreds of years ago. It's more like he was writing about the pagan religion of a few of his shady neighbors, maybe living on the other side of the mountain, that they practiced in private. How close would Snorri have been to these people? We don't know, but he was not removed 200 years from actual pagans that lived, like some people claim. It was far, far closer to him in that time in history. So the Prose Edda is far more reliable than people give it credit. The number four thing, most important maybe, skaldic poetry. Composed by pagans, remembered by scribes. Skaldic poems were composed by real historical poets called skalds in the courts of pagan kings that we can confirm to have lived from multiple accounts, all corroborating the same things. These skaldic poems number in the hundreds, maybe even the thousands. And there's a great website. I'll put it up right here if you guys haven't discovered that one already. It records a whole bunch of different skaldic poetry. These were performed during pagan times at the courts of kings. They were mostly about the deeds of kings and the lifetimes, but they also reflect the religion and beliefs quite a good amount. They also use archaic language and structure. So even though they were written down in a lot of these Icelandic sagas, the poems themselves recorded, you guys will have seen this if you've read any sagas. It's you barely go 2 pages without reading some sort of poetry in there. And a lot of those skaldic poems we know for sure can be dated to pagan times. They were written down later, but they were products of the living Norse religion that was passed down orally over the centuries, and there's no reason to dismiss them just because Christian scribes recorded them. The content, style, and the known authorship, most importantly, confirm their pagan origins. As for the rest of the sagas, outside of the skaldic poems that are recorded in them, it's a bit different. The Icelandic sagas often mix historical events with legendary ones. Some sagas are obviously over exaggerated and sometimes completely made up, even. Okay, yeah, we know Sigurd probably didn't come across a dragon and kill him and then go through a burning wall of fire to wake up a sleeping Valkyrie in the middle of nature somewhere. That probably didn't happen. But you know what? That exact tale and the saga of the Völsungs tells of Attila the Hun, a figure who we know to have lived. So part of that is maybe even true too. But some sagas are far more reliable and they closely match a lot of what we can see in other accounts and archaeological finds. And they actually record far more pagan belief and practice than you might think. Some sagas deliberately skip over anything pagan in order to conceal it. For example, funerals are barely ever documented in detail. The saga authors always deliberately skip over it and they say, and he was buried according to the customs of the times. But for other instances, they do record pagan practice. In the homily book, for example, it records how women used to give offerings to the land spirits that were living in stones and cairns. We have archaeology and, of course, later folk traditions also corroborating this. And finally, we also have the first-hand accounts, not saga authors from 300 years after, but foreign chroniclers visiting the pagan Norse and documenting them firsthand, or at least based on first-hand reports that they had heard. We have people like Ibn Fadlan, a Muslim traveler that documented a Viking Rus funeral in the east of Europe in great detail. It's although his tone may have hidden some things and made some things over exaggeration, or his lack of understanding of the culture may have demonized it, but it is in alignment, this funeral, with a lot of the archaeological finds that we have. Adam of Bremen is another one. He reports on the temple of Uppsala and its pagan sacrifices there. Some of the things in there we can confirm as well, like the temple was near a sacred grove. Groves were attested as sacred places, not just in the Norse and Germanic world, but all over European pagan sources. Some things even Adam of Bremen doesn't record. For example, he writes that songs were sung at the sacrifices that were so evil that it is best not to repeat them. So there, it's not going to tell us everything, but it's going to be a reliable source. Theodmar of Merseburg, another one, writes about the sacrifices at the temple of Leyde. They offered to the gods 99 men and just as many horses and other animals, those types of things. Those accounts may be biased or exaggerated and not reliable. For example, they've done archaeological excavations at Leyde and they've not found a ton of evidence of sacrificial remains at least at that scale that he was talking about. So we can't be exactly sure. They could have decomposed or whatever. But they're still primary sources, and they confirm key elements of Norse life that are documented in other sources. We can finally speak about the continental Germanic sources. Beyond Scandinavia, there's a much wider array of sources, not as numerous, and they are definitely fragmented, and they're hard to basically get to and find the important parts, but they do show a vast variety of practice of the religion in a wider area, things that are missing from the Norse sources. One of the best ones is Germania by Tacitus. He describes sacred groves, he describes divination, sacrifices, omens, all these types of things. These were Roman pagans, by the way, documenting Germanic pagans, and much of that that he documented is confirmed by the Norse sources 1,000 years later. So some things we know were practiced for 1,000 years at least. We also have Bede. He preserves Anglo-Saxon pagan beliefs, calendars, and the conversion process. Most of that is regarded as reliable. Jordanes offers a few insights into Gothic paganism, ancestor worship, much earlier than the Norse as well. This could be from the 4th, 5th, 6th century. Beowulf is another source, maybe. It's an Anglo-Saxon, Old English source, but even there's a lot of traces of pagan belief in there. Works like the Saxon Hylians and these other law codes and chronicles from continental Europe, it shows Old Saxon belief through Christian reinterpretation. And they're actually super valuable sources for some parts of it. We see also a ton of continental Germanic laws that forbid pagan practice. They write them down because they want to remove them from existence. But the funny part is we today can read them because of that, and then keep doing these traditions and keep them alive today, 1,000 years after they thought they had killed us all off. When the non-Norse sources confirm what's in the sagas and Eddas, or at least show some sort of relation, we can be even more confident that we're looking at shared ancient traditions, not just Norse, but shared Germanic pagan traditions. And that's why I included all of these Germanic sources in my book as well. The Norse ones, the Germanic ones. It's why I wanted to make a source book exactly like this, because there hasn't been any of these before, compiling all the primary and secondary sources. It's minimal fluff, and I tried to focus on that and leave the New Age and scholarly interpretations out of it as much as possible, but sometimes it's for sure necessary. These sources don't give a clear answer a lot of the time, and then we have to use our brains and look at comparative mythology and religion and tie related sources together, and that's great. We have to do that, but it's important to start from the base core sources that we have. Read them all, learn from them all. They're not necessarily all going to be true, but at least read them, and then we can determine which ones are reliable versus not. So that is my 2 cents on that. Yeah, thank you for watching the whole video. I'm not uploading a whole lot anymore because people don't have the attention spans anymore, so trying to do some more shorts, even though I hate it. But yeah, if these videos do well, I'll do more of them. That's as simple as that. So yeah, check back next week, and maybe if you're watching this video already, the book is already out. Link will be below, and that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.